A canvas floor gym in Bangkok. The smell of liniment. A woman in red shorts who hadn't lost in 3 years. That's where this starts. Not in a living room. Not in a kitchen. Not from a letter or a box. This one starts 7,000 miles from anything I've ever touched, in a place I have never been, on a floor I will never stand on, with a woman whose full name I do not have. I heard this story from a man named Prasert. One time, in a parking lot behind a gym in Seattle, in 1974. It was November. It was raining, that thin Pacific Northwest rain that doesn't fall so much as hover. I was 22. I had been training at Taiki Kimura's gym for about 8 months. Prasert had been there for 5. He was quiet. He barely spoke during sessions, came in, worked, left. Thai. Mid-30s. Bad knees. He held pads for the younger guys and moved like a man who used to be fast and was now just precise. That night after training, I was unlocking my car and Prasert was standing by the dumpster smoking a cigarette. I don't remember how it started. I think I asked him something about a kick he demonstrated that evening, a switch kick that came from an angle I hadn't seen before. He answered. And then he kept talking. And what came out over the next 40 minutes, in imperfect English, with the rain sitting on both of us, was this. I'm going to tell it the way it came to me. I filled in some gaps, I'll be honest about that. Prasert's English was functional but sparse. He gave me the bones. Some of the muscle is mine. Some of the connective tissue I added over the years of carrying this, turning it over, trying to understand what it meant. I don't know anymore which details are his and which are mine. I know the architecture is his. I know the woman is real. I know the camp is real. I know what happened on that canvas floor is real, or as real as anything can be when it comes to you through one man's mouth in a parking lot in the rain 30 years ago. 3 people were in that camp that afternoon. 3 people later told versions of what happened. Prasert saw one thing. The woman, years later, told a journalist something different. And the trainer, a man Prasert called Ajarn, same name as Prasert himself, different person, Ajarn told his own version at a dinner years after that. None of the 3 versions agree on how it ended. I'm giving you all 3. You hold them however you want. The camp was outside the city. Not far, Prasert said 40 minutes by truck from the stadiums, from Lumpini, from the noise. But far enough that the sounds changed. Dogs. Roosters at wrong hours. The slap of rope on canvas bags. The thud of shins against pads. Prasert said it sounded like someone clapping with wet hands. That's his phrase. I remember it exactly because it was one of the few times his English produced an image that was better than anything I could have made myself. Clapping with wet hands. It wasn't a tourist gym. Foreigners didn't come to Thai camps in 1971. Not casually. Not often. This was a working camp, boys who started at 8, men who fought twice a month at provincial stadia, and the occasional woman who had come from somewhere else and had a kick that trainers talked about in other gyms. There were maybe 120 women fighting on provincial cards in Thailand in 1971. Prasert said that number 120, roughly, with the confidence of a man who had counted. Out of those 120, maybe 15 were serious. Full time. Training every day, fighting every month. And out of those 15, 1 had not lost in 3 years. Horror. I don't have her name. Prasert used a nickname, a Thai word I couldn't spell then and can't reconstruct now. It might have been a ring name. It might have been what the camp called her. I asked him to repeat it twice and I still couldn't hold it. So I don't have it. I have her, short, thick legs, dark hair tied back with a piece of white cloth, hands that were always wrapped even when she wasn't training. Prasert said she kept her hands wrapped the way some people keep their shoes tied, not because she was about to do something, but because she was always ready to do something. On the bench along the back wall of the camp, there was a bottle. Green glass. Half full of Muay Thai boxing oil. Liniment. If you've never smelled it, menthol, camphor, and something underneath that's almost sweet but not quite. It gets into everything. Into the canvas, into the wraps, into the wood of the bench, into your skin for days after. Prasert mentioned this bottle 3 times in 40 minutes of talking. I noticed. I don't know why he kept returning to it. Maybe it was a focal point for his memory, the way a small object sometimes anchors a large scene. Maybe it was just on his mind. But he mentioned it 3 times, so I'm mentioning it now. The bottle was always half full. Nobody finished it. Nobody refilled it. It sat on the bench like a small monument to something nobody had named. February in Bangkok. 90 degrees. Humidity that sits on your skin like a second shirt you can't take off. Everything in that camp had an orange quality, the rusted chains holding the heavy bags, the canvas roof filtering the afternoon sun, the wood of the posts, the light itself. Amber and close. The air smelled like Muay and sweat and something green, the trees outside, the vegetation that pressed against the back of the camp, leaves the size of your hand brushing the canvas walls when the wind moved. That's the place. That's where this happened. Prasert knew her before that afternoon. Not well, he trained at a different camp, a men's gym near Rajadamnern, across the city. But Muay Thai in Bangkok in 1971 was a small world. Everyone knew who was winning. Everyone knew who was worth watching. And she was worth watching. She had started at this camp in 1968. Walked in one morning, Prasert didn't know from where, didn't know her background, didn't know if she'd trained before. He knew what Ajahn had told him later, that she showed up, said she wanted to fight, and Ajahn looked at her legs, short, thick, planted like posts, and said come back tomorrow. She came back. And the day after. And every day for 3 years. She fought women on the provincial circuit. There weren't many, but there were enough. Monthly cards in Chiang Mai, Kon Kaen, Nakhon Ratchasima. Small stadia with tin roofs and concrete floors and crowds that smelled like beer and dried fish. She fought on those cards and she won. Every time. For 3 years. Prasert said her record was something like 31-0. He wasn't certain of the number, it might have been 28, might have been 33. But the 0 was certain. She had not lost. She also fought men in exhibitions. Not full rules, Prasert was clear about this. Exhibition rules meant lighter contact, shorter rounds, no elbows. But enough contact that you felt it. Enough that it counted as fighting and not dancing. She fought men and she didn't always win. Prasert said she lost some of those exhibitions. But she won enough of them that people talked. People talked about her the way people talk about anything that doesn't fit the shape they expect. What made her dangerous, Prasert said this with a specificity that told me he had watched her many times, was the switch kick. Her right round kick was good. Normal. Professional level, fast, clean. But her switch kick, the left kick thrown from a right stance by switching the feet mid-motion, was something else. Prasert said it came from a place you couldn't see. He said most fighters telegraph a switch kick, there's a dip, a weight shift, a half second of preparation that a trained eye can read. She didn't have that half second. She went from standing to kicking without the middle part. As if the switch happened inside her body, in the hips, invisible, and the kick just appeared. He said her shins were like wood. He said that twice. Like wood. Years of conditioning, kicking the bag, kicking the banana tree, rubbing the Nam Man Muay into the bone every night, letting the microfractures heal harder than they'd been before. Her shins didn't crack. They didn't bruise. They were weapons that happened to be attached to a person. 3 years undefeated. 31 fights. A switch kick that appeared from nowhere. Shins like wood. And a calm about her. Prasert said this last, almost as an afterthought, a calm that wasn't confidence and wasn't arrogance and wasn't emptiness. It was something else. It was the calm of a person who has tested herself enough times to know exactly what she can do, and is no longer interested in proving it to anyone who hasn't asked. She was on the heavy bag that afternoon when Bruce Lee walked into her camp. Bruce was in Thailand. That much exists outside of Prasert's story. The big boss was filming in Pak Chom, 3 hours northeast of Bangkok, in early 1971. The shoot was chaotic. Raymond Chow has spoken about this. The original director left. Bruce took over parts of the direction. It was his first starring role and nothing was going smoothly. But there were days off. Days when the crew wasn't shooting. Days when Bruce was in Bangkok with nothing on his schedule. What a man like Bruce does with an empty afternoon in Bangkok in 1971, a man who studies fighting the way a linguist studies languages, who collects movement the way some people collect stamps, is not difficult to imagine. He went to camps. He went to watch. Prasert said Bruce came to Ajarn's camp on a Thursday. Around 3 in the afternoon. He came alone. No film crew, no translator, no handler. Just Bruce in dark trousers, a plain white t-shirt, flat black shoes. Prasert said Bruce looked like a tourist who had taken a wrong turn, except for one thing. The way he moved. Prasert said the way Bruce moved was not tourist. It was a man who had spent every day of his adult life paying attention to how weight transfers from one foot to another. A man whose body was always in the middle of a sentence, even when standing still. Remember the bottle on the bench. We'll come back to it. Prasert was at the camp the day because Ajarn had asked him to help with some younger fighters' pad work, corrections, the small technical adjustments that an older fighter can see and a young fighter can't feel yet. Prasert was 31. His knees had ended his career 2 years before. He could still demonstrate, still hold pads, still move, but he couldn't fight. Not at the level he'd fought before. So he helped. He stayed in the orbit of the thing he'd loved by being useful to it in smaller ways. The afternoon session was already running when Bruce arrived. 6 or 7 fighters working bags and pads. The woman was at her usual station, second heavy bag from the left, the one that hung slightly lower than the others because of an extra link in the chain. She was working round kicks. Left, right, switching stances every 6 strikes. Prasert said her rhythm was like a clock someone had wound too tight, fast, even, relentless, but compressed. As if each kick was being held back. Not fully released. 80%. Saving the other 20 for something that required it. Bruce stood at the edge of the canvas mat and watched. He didn't sit. Didn't lean against a post. Didn't cross his arms. He stood with his weight even in his hands at his sides and he watched her work. And she noticed. Prasert was specific about this. She noticed within the first 2 minutes. Not because she looked at Bruce directly, she didn't stop, didn't break rhythm, didn't turn her head. But her kicks changed. Slightly harder. Slightly crisper. The bag swung a degree or two wider on each impact. The sound of the shin hitting the canvas shifted from a thud to something closer to a crack. She was performing. Not for vanity, Prasert didn't think it was vanity. It was the reflex of any serious fighter who senses they are being watched by someone who understands what they are looking at. She didn't know who Bruce was. That mattered. Prasert said it twice and I want to say it here, she did not know. Bruce Lee in February 1971 was not Bruce Lee to the world. The Big Boss hadn't been released yet, that was October. In a camp outside Bangkok, he was just a thin Chinese man in a white t-shirt who had walked in off the road and was watching too carefully to be a tourist. She didn't know his name. She just knew his eyes were reading her the way only another fighter's eyes read you. And she responded to that reading by giving him more to read. Bruce watched for 20 minutes. He did not move. Prasert said he did not shift his weight from one foot to the other in 20 minutes of standing. Prasert noticed because his own knees would have been screaming after 5. 20 minutes is a long time. I want you to feel that before we move on. Stand in a room. Don't sit. Don't lean. Don't cross your arms. Don't shift your weight. 20 minutes. Most people last about 90 seconds before something in the body starts to argue. The lower back. The hips. The arches of the feet. The body wants to redistribute. It wants to find a new shape. It wants relief. Bruce stood for 20 minutes and his body did not argue. Prasert said this was the first thing that made him pay attention to Bruce as a fighter rather than as a guest. Anyone can walk into a camp. Anyone can wear flat shoes. Anyone can have alert eyes. But standing still for 20 minutes, really still, no micro shifts, no weight transfers, no hand on hip, no hand in pocket, that's a body that has been trained to do exactly that. To hold ground. To be unmoving and unmoved. Prasert was holding pads for one of the younger fighters at the time, on the far side of the canvas mat. He kept glancing over. Every minute or so. Bruce was always exactly where he had been. Same posture. Same eye line. Same depth of breath. Prasert said you could tell from across the floor that Bruce's breathing had slowed. He was breathing the way men breathe in meditation, not the way men breathe while watching. I still don't fully believe this part. 20 minutes is a long time. Memories stretch. Prasert told this story in 1974, 3 years after it happened. 3 years is enough for a quiet 30 seconds to grow into a full minute, for a long minute to become 5 minutes of close attention to become 20 minutes of statue stillness in the retelling. I don't know how much of the 20 minutes is real and how much is what 20 minutes felt like to a man watching another man not move. But Prasert said 20. So I'm saying 20. What I do believe is this: the woman noticed the watching, and the watching changed her work. That part is consistent across all 3 versions. The watching was real. The duration is in question. The effect is not. She kicked the bag. She switched stance. She kicked the bag. She switched. Her wraps were dark with sweat by the end of the first 10 minutes. Her hair tie, that piece of white cloth, was gray with sweat by the end of the second 10. Prasert said her face never changed. No effort visible. No strain. Just the work, going through her, leaving her body through her shins, into the bag, into the chain, into the rafters, into the orange afternoon. Then she stopped. She stepped back from the bag. Wiped her face with the rag hanging from the nearest post. Walked to the bench. Sat down. Picked up the bottle of Nam Man Muay, unscrewed the cap, poured a small amount into her palm, and started rubbing it into her shins. Slow. Methodical. The way someone tends to a tool they will use again tomorrow and the day after and every day after that. Bruce was still standing in the same place. She finished her shins. Capped the bottle. Set it back on the bench in exactly the position it had been before, the rag stuffed in the top, the green glass catching a sliver of late afternoon sun. Then she looked across the canvas floor, directly at Bruce, for the first time. 20 feet between them. Maybe a little more. The kind of distance where you can see a person's face but not read their expression in detail. Prasert said she looked at Bruce with a level, even gaze, not hostile, not friendly, the look fighters give each other when the pretense is over. Assessment. Reading the body. Deciding what the body could do. She held the look for what Prasert estimated at 6 or 7 seconds. Then she said something to Ajarn. In Thai. Prasert heard it. What she said in Thai was simple. Prasert told me the literal translation. Ask him if he wants to try. That's it. 5 words. No challenge in them. No bravado. The Thai word for try, Prasert tried to explain this, and I'm doing my best to relay what he said, has a quality closer to test or attempt. It's not the casual English try. It's the word a craftsman uses when handing a tool to another craftsman, see if it fits your hand. Ajarn nodded. Walked across the canvas to Bruce. They spoke. Ajarn's English, Prasert said, was functional enough for basics, not enough for nuance. Bruce's English was perfect, of course. Ajarn asked Bruce who he was, why he was there. Bruce said he was making a film north of the city. He said he trained in Kung Fu. He said he was interested in Muay Thai and meant no disrespect to the camp. Prasert was close enough to hear most of this directly. Then Ajarn said the thing the woman had asked him to say. He said, she asks if you want to try. Bruce looked past Ajarn at the woman on the bench. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the floor in front of her feet, that polite, neutral non-look that Thai etiquette uses to give space to a question someone else is being asked. Prasert said Bruce was quiet for maybe 4 seconds. And then he answered Ajarn, but he was looking at her when he answered. He said one word. He said, yes. That's version 1 of the moment. Prasert's version. Ajarn asked translator. The exchange went through Ajarn because that was the protocol of the camp. The student asks the teacher asks the guest answers the teacher. 3-way diplomacy on a canvas floor. But there's a second version. Hers. From the magazine interview in 1978, the one a friend of mine got hold of years later, photocopied, partially translated by someone whose name I don't have. Her version, what reached me, after multiple hands, went like this. She said she didn't ask Ajarn to translate. She said she got up from the bench, still holding her wraps in her left hand, walked across the canvas floor herself, stopped in front of the Chinese man, and spoke to him directly. She said one word. In English. She said, spar? Just that. One word, with a question mark. She said it because it was the only English word she knew that would do the job. She had picked it up from foreign sailors and the occasional American soldier who passed through the city. She didn't speak English in any real sense. She had a small inventory of words for specific situations, and spar was one of them. She said. Bruce smiled. Now, I want to stop here. 2 versions. Prasert says Ajarn translated. She says she walked over and said it herself. Both can't be true. Either she crossed the floor or she didn't. Either Ajarn carried the question or she did. Both of them agreed she asked. Both agreed Bruce answered yes. The mechanism of how the question got from her to him, that's where the versions split, and I cannot reconcile them. I have asked myself which is more likely, and I've gone back and forth. If I had to guess, and a guess is all this is, I think she crossed the floor. I think Prasert remembered Ajahn translating because that was the protocol he was used to, and his memory smoothed the moment into the shape it normally would have taken. But that's a guess. Her version, even at 6 removes, has a specificity to it that feels lived. The wraps in her left hand. The trailing them like a ribbon, that's a phrase from the magazine that survived all the translation, and it's the kind of phrase a person remembers about themselves rather than the kind a person invents. But I don't know. What I know is, the question was asked. The answer was yes. They walked toward the center of the canvas mat together. This is the third version. Ajahns. And Ajahns' version came to me through Prasert secondhand. Prasert told me that Ajahn, at a dinner in Bangkok in the late 70s, told a small group of former fighters his version of that afternoon. One of them later told Prasert. Prasert told me. So this is Ajahns' version, filtered through one Thai trainer, then one young American in a parking lot, then 30 years of my own memory. Here is what Ajahn saw. Ajahn watched Bruce for the same 20 minutes Prasert did, but Ajahn was watching differently. Prasert was watching as a former fighter, assessing, measuring, reading. Ajahn was watching as a teacher. He was looking at Bruce the way a teacher looks at a student, not for danger, but for what he could be taught, and what he might already know that the teacher had forgotten. Ajahn said, according to Prasert, according to the friend of Prasert who was at the dinner, that Bruce was the most attentive watcher he had ever seen at his camp. More attentive than any Thai trainee. More attentive than any fighter from another camp who had come to study. He said Bruce's eyes were not on the woman's kicks. They were on her hips. On the small movement just before the kick. The thing most observers don't notice because the kick itself takes the attention. Ajahn said Bruce was studying her switch kick in particular. The thing she was famous for. The thing that came from a place you couldn't see. Bruce was watching for the place. He was looking for where the switch began, in the hip, in the foot, in the breath. He was watching the way a man watches who intends to take something home with him. And then Ajahn said something that, if true, changes the whole story. Ajahn said, she felt him watching for the switch, and she gave him the switch on purpose. Slow. Deliberate. Not a real switch kick, a demonstration of one. The way a master gives a technique to a student by showing it once, openly, knowing the student will not be able to copy it but might begin to understand how it is built. Ajahn said she gave Bruce her switch kick 3 times in those 20 minutes, in a rhythm slightly slower than her others. Bruce caught it the first time. Ajahn could see the catch in Bruce's face, a small contraction at the corner of the eye, the look of a man who has just been handed a key. The second time, Bruce was watching for it. The third time, Bruce nodded. Slightly. Just once. A nod toward the bag, toward the woman, toward the kick, and acknowledgement. Ajahn said this was when he understood that something unusual was about to happen at his camp. Because she had given him the technique on purpose. And he had recognized the gift. And the gift, in a camp like that, in a culture like that, in the silent vocabulary of Thai boxing, is an invitation. Not to spar. Spar is what comes next. The gift is what comes before. The gift is, I see you. I see you can see me. Now let's do something. When she said the word, whether through Ajahn or directly, doesn't matter for this version. Ajahn already knew what Bruce would say. Ajahn said, he had to say yes. She had already asked, and he had already answered, 20 minutes earlier, by watching the way he watched. I'll tell you what my friend's translation of the magazine quote of her own words said about this. She said almost the same thing. She said she'd known he would say yes from the moment he stepped onto the edge of the canvas. She said the word she spoke was not really a question. It was a confirmation of something already agreed upon. Two versions, separated by everything, said the same thing about this part. What my father, sorry. What my friend, who knew Prasert later, what people who heard this story said, when I told them this part, was, that's the part that makes the story real. Because if it were invented, the inventor would have made the question matter. The question would have been a turning point. Instead, in two versions out of three, the question is described as a formality. A confirmation. The decision had already been made by the watching. Ajahn said, in Bruce's culture and in his own, this was the same thing. Two men and a woman, but the principle was the same, recognizing each other across a floor without speaking. The Thai word for it, Prasert said, is something close to sayasat, but he wasn't sure about the term, and I'm not sure I'm spelling it right, and I don't want to invent a Thai concept I can't verify. So I'll just describe it, the silent agreement to test something together. Not to fight. To test. To find out. That's what Ajahn said happened in those 20 minutes. You'd think the sparring is the part of this story that matters most. It isn't. The sparring is what they had already decided to do. The story is in the deciding. Her version is the hardest one to give you, because it has come through the most hands. In 1978, a Thai sports magazine, the title my friend translated is something like Stadium Monthly, but I'm not certain, ran an interview with her. She was 32 by then. She had retired from fighting 2 years earlier, in 1976. The interview was a profile piece. Her career, her record, her camp, her plans. 3 pages with 2 black and white photos. In the middle of the interview, the journalist asked her to name the most interesting opponent of her career. She didn't name a fighter. She named an afternoon. She said, the afternoon a Chinese man came to my camp. The journalist asked her to explain. She did. According to the photocopied translation that reached me, which I have not seen myself, only had described, she gave a short version of the story. About a page of magazine column. The journalist did not know who the Chinese man was. She did not name him. Neither did the journalist push. The piece was about her, not him. It was a side anecdote in a longer profile. But the anecdote is what survived. The friend who got the magazine was a martial arts historian who recognized the date and the location and the description and put together what the journalist had not, that the Chinese man was Bruce. He photocopied that page. He had it loosely translated. And it traveled, slowly, through a small network of people who care about this kind of thing, until it reached me. What her version said, the parts one have, went like this. She said she had been training that afternoon and a foreign man came to watch. She said she could feel him watching. She said she did her best work that day not because she wanted to impress him but because she was curious what he would do if she gave him her real kicks instead of her training kicks. She said most foreigners who came to the camp watched without seeing, they saw the spectacle of the kicks but not the structure underneath. She wanted to know if this man saw the structure. She gave him 3 switch kicks, slower than her usual ones. She said she could tell he saw the third one. She said his eyes changed. She said it was like watching someone read a sentence in a book they hadn't realized they could read. This matches what Ajahn said. 2 versions, separated by years and journalists and translators, agreed on the switch kicks. That convergence is the closest thing I have to verification that this part is real. She said when she finished her bag work, she walked across the canvas and asked him to spar. She said she knew he would say yes. She said when he said yes, his face didn't change much, but the corners of his mouth softened, not a smile exactly, but the relaxation that comes before a smile. They walked to the center of the mat. Ajahn followed. 2 younger fighters, Prasert's pads were now hanging from his hand, forgotten, gathered at the edges. Prasert came over too. Everyone in the camp had stopped working. She said the round lasted, and here her version diverges from the others. She said the round lasted less than 2 minutes. Prasert said the round lasted about 3 minutes. Ajarn, according to the dinner, said the round lasted long enough that everyone forgot to count. 3 estimates: 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and immeasurable. The round itself, what happened inside those 2 or 3 or uncountable minutes, is where this story has to be told most carefully, because all 3 witnesses describe it differently, and none of them describe it the way you would expect. I'm going to give you the round next. It's not what you think. They stood in the center of the canvas mat, about 4 feet apart. The late afternoon sun was coming through the open walls at an angle now lower, more orange, casting long shadows across the packed dirt beyond the canvas edge. The younger fighters had stopped working. Prasert had set his pads down on the bench, next to the bottle of Nam Man Muay. Ajarn stood at the edge of the mat with his arms folded. Everyone was watching. No one rang a bell. No one said begin. Prasert said the round started the way sparring starts between 2 people who don't need a signal. One of them moved, and the other responded, and then it was happening. She moved first. All 3 versions agree on this. She moved first. A jab, not a kick, a jab. Testing range. Seeing where his head was relative to her hand. Bruce slipped it. Barely moved, just enough that her fist passed his cheek by an inch, maybe 2. She followed with a low kick, left side, aimed at his thigh. Bruce checked it. Lifted his leg, took the kick on his shin. Prasert said Bruce's face changed when the kick landed on his shin. Not pain, or not only pain, but recognition. He felt her shin. He felt what 3 years of conditioning had made. She threw 3 more kicks in the first 20 seconds. Left round kick. Right round kick. A teep, a push kick to the body, meant to create distance, to push him back, to test his base. Bruce ate the teep. Took it on his forearms, slid back about 6 inches on the canvas, reset. He hadn't thrown a single strike. If you've never sparred with someone from a different system, you can't fully understand what was happening in those first 20 seconds. Try anyway. She was Muay Thai. Her weapons were shins, knees, elbows, and the clinch. Her distance was close to medium. Her rhythm was the rhythm of Thai boxing, measured, patient, heavy. Each strike came with full hip rotation, full commitment, full intention. She wasn't playing. She was testing him with real techniques at maybe 70% power, hard enough to hurt, controlled enough not to injure. Bruce was something else. Whatever Bruce was in February 1971, and I want to be careful here, because what Bruce was always evolving, always shedding, always adding. Whatever he was that afternoon, it was not Muay Thai, and it was not Kung Fu, and it was not karate. It was a system of movement that had no name yet, or had several names, or had a name he hadn't settled on. What it looked like, from the outside, according to Prasert, it looked like a man who was not there. Every time her shin arrived at the place his body had been, his body was somewhere else. Not far. An inch. 2 inches. Just enough. She kicked. He wasn't there. She kicked again. He wasn't there again. She threw the teep. He took it, but he took it on purpose. Prasert could tell the difference. The slips were avoidance. The teep was acceptance. Bruce let the teep land because he wanted to feel her power. He wanted to know how hard she could push. 30 seconds. 40 seconds. A minute. She was attacking. He was not. Prasert said something changed in her face around the 1-minute mark. Not frustration, Prasert was clear about this. Not anger. It was the face of a person solving a problem. She had thrown 15, maybe 20 strikes, and none of them had landed clean. The shin shack, that was the only clean contact. Everything else had found air, or forearm, or the space where Bruce had been a quarter second earlier. She was solving the problem of a man who wouldn't let her hit him and wouldn't hit her back. This is where the versions diverge. Prasert's version, around the 90-second mark, she threw the switch kick. The famous one. The one that came from nowhere. The one Bruce had watched her practice for 20 minutes. She threw it and Bruce caught it. Not blocked. Caught. His hand came up and closed around her shin the way you close your hand around a railing, firm, not violent, just there. He caught the kick in the air, mid-flight, at the apex of its arc. And he held it. Prasert said the camp went silent. The kind of silent that has weight. The kind of silent where you can hear the dogs outside and the distant sound of a truck on the road a quarter-mile away. Bruce held her shin in his hand for what Prasert said was about 3 seconds. She was balanced on one leg, balanced perfectly, because she was a fighter who could balance on one leg for hours, but she was held. Caught mid-flight. Stopped. Then Bruce let go. Gently. He opened his hand and let her leg return to the ground. He stepped back. 1 step. He put his hands down, not in a guard, not in a stance. Down. At his sides. The way they had been when he was watching. And he said one word. He said, again. Her version, the magazine version, the translated version, the version that came to me through 6 people, said something different about this moment. She said Bruce didn't catch the switch kick. She said he avoided it the same way he'd avoided everything else. She said the switch kick went through the space where his jaw had been and found nothing. She said that was the moment she understood she was facing something she had never faced. Not a better fighter, she didn't use that word. A different kind of fighter. A kind she hadn't known existed. She said after the switch kick missed, she stopped. She planted both feet. She looked at him. And he looked at her. And the look he gave her, she said this in the magazine, and it survived all the translations, the look he gave her was respect. Pure. Not condescension. Not you're good for a woman. Not nice try. Respect the way one professional gives it to another. Recognition. She said he's the one who spoke first. She said he said something in English she didn't fully understand, more than one word, a short sentence. She said Ajarn translated it for her later. She said what Bruce said was, your switch kick is real. Ajarn's version, the dinner version, through Prasert, through the friend, through me, was shorter. Ajarn said the round lasted long enough that everyone forgot to count. He said Bruce avoided everything. He said Bruce threw nothing. He said at the end, however it ended, both of them stopped at the same time. Not one before the other. Together. As if they had agreed, without speaking, that they had learned what they came to learn. Ajarn said after the round, Bruce bowed. Not a Thai bow, not the Y. A Chinese bow. Hands together, slight inclination of the upper body. She bowed back. The Thai way, a Y, hands pressed together, head slightly lowered. Ajarn said, Muay Thai is the hardest style to avoid. He avoided it. That tells you what he was. That's the comment bait. Ajarn said it. Not me. I'm just telling you what came down the chain. Whether Muay Thai is the hardest style to avoid, whether that claim is fair, whether Ajarn was biased, whether Bruce was really that fast or whether memory made him faster, that's not for me to decide. Ajarn said it. He meant it. You can argue with a man who's probably no longer alive. I'm just delivering. After the round, however it ended, whoever spoke first, whether the kick was caught or missed after it was over, Bruce did something that all three versions agree on. He walked to the heavy bag. The second bag from the left, the one with the extra link. Her bag. He stood in front of it. And he asked Ajarn, through gesture, through pointing, through whatever communication was available between a man who spoke Cantonese and English and a man who spoke Thai and some English, he asked Ajarn to show him the switch kick. Not her. He asked the teacher. Prasert said this was protocol. In a Thai camp, you don't ask the fighter directly. You ask the teacher. The teacher decides whether to give the knowledge. Bruce knew this or intuited it or had enough cross-cultural literacy to feel the shape of the hierarchy without being told. Ajarn looked at the woman. She nodded. A small nod. Permission. Ajarn demonstrated the switch kick. Once. Slowly. Breaking it into pieces, the weight shift, the pivot, the hip rotation, the whip of the shin. He did it once, the way a teacher does it. Then he stepped back. Bruce did it. Not perfectly. Prasert was clear about that, it wasn't perfect. The angle was slightly off. The hip was slightly late. The foot didn't quite pivot the way a Thai fighter's foot pivots after years of that specific repetition. But the structure was there. The architecture was there. The invisible switch, the thing she was famous for, the thing most fighters can't do after months of practice, Bruce had the shape of it on the first attempt. Prasert said. Ajarn stared. Not at Bruce's kick. At Bruce's hips. At the place where the switch happened. Because Bruce had found the mechanism, not the surface, not the cosmetic shape of the kick, but the internal mechanism, the thing inside the body that makes the kick possible on one viewing in one attempt. Years later, when I heard about this, when this story had settled in me and I had turned it over enough times to understand what it meant, I thought about what that would feel like. To be her. To have spent 3 years building something invisible inside your body, something no one else could do, something that was yours, and to watch a man you'd never met find the key to it in 20 minutes of watching in one attempt on a bag. What would that feel like? I think it would feel like being read. Like someone opening a book you thought was in a language no one else spoke, and reading it aloud, back to you, in an accent you'd never heard but couldn't deny was correct. She watched Bruce do the switch kick 3 more times. Each time better. Each time closer to the thing she did. By the 4th attempt, Prasert said, it was 80% of hers. Not as powerful. Bruce was lighter, had thinner shins, had not spent 3 years conditioning the bone. But structurally, mechanically 80% in 4 attempts. She walked over to the bag. She stood next to Bruce. She did the kick once at full speed, the real version, the one that came from nowhere. Then she did it again, slower. Showing him the last 20%. The thing Ajarn's demonstration hadn't contained because Ajarn had retired in the 60s and hadn't kicked at her level in a decade. She was teaching him. The woman who hadn't lost in 3 years was standing next to a thin Chinese man in a white t-shirt, on a canvas floor in a camp outside Bangkok, in February of 1971, showing him the thing that made her unbeatable. Because he'd earned it. Not by beating her. Not by proving he was better. By showing her he could see it and by asking to learn it with his hands down and his bow honest and his intention clean. I don't know how long Bruce stayed at the camp that afternoon. Prasert said maybe 2 hours total. Maybe less. The magazine didn't specify. Ajarn's dinner version didn't say. What I know is, Bruce left. He went back to the film shoot, or to his hotel, or to wherever a man like Bruce went in Bangkok in February 1971 when the sun started going down and the camp grew quiet and the evening training session was about to begin for people who were not him. He left. And I don't know if he ever went back. I don't know if Bruce and this woman ever spoke again. I don't know if he acknowledged what she gave him. I don't know if the switch kick showed up in his training after that, though I've watched his films, and there are moments, late in his career, where his kicks have a quality that is not purely Wing Chun, not purely any northern Chinese style, something rounder, something that rotates from the hip in a way that looks Thai to me. But I'm not qualified to make that claim. I'm seeing what I want to see. I'm seeing a line between a camp in Bangkok and a film set in Hong Kong, and the line may not exist outside my wanting it to. What I do know, what reached me through the magazine, through the chain of hands, is what happened to her. She fought for 5 more years after that afternoon. She retired in 1976, at 30. Her record, by the time she stopped, was something in the range of 45 wins and 3 losses. The 3 losses all came after 1971, all in the last 5 years of her career. She lost to younger fighters. She lost the way all fighters eventually lose, not because they get worse, but because the body accumulates debt and the younger bodies haven't started paying yet. She stayed at Ajahran's camp. She became a trainer. She taught women and some men the things Ajahran had taught her and the things she had taught herself. She taught the switch kick to students who would never be able to do it the way she did it, but who would carry pieces of it into their own fighting. The magazine interview was in 1978. She was 32. She had been retired 2 years. The journalist described her as small and quiet and polite and possessed of the calmest eyes in any gym in Bangkok. That's the translated phrase. The calmest eyes. I like that. I think that's probably accurate. What happened after 1978, I don't know. The chain ends. The magazine is the last verified point. After that, silence. She might have trained fighters for decades. She might have left Muay Thai entirely. She might still be alive, she'd be in her late 70s now. She might have died young, fighters sometimes do, the body collecting its debts early. I don't know. I have an afternoon in February and an interview 7 years later and nothing after. I drove past Takey's old gym in Seattle 2 months ago. It's not a gym anymore, hasn't been for years. But the parking lot is the same. The dumpster is gone, replaced by a recycling station, but the space is the same. The same dimensions. The same concrete. I stood there for a few minutes, by my car, in the rain. That thin Pacific Northwest rain that doesn't fall so much as hover. And I thought about Prasert, standing in that same spot, 30 years before me, with a cigarette and a story he'd been holding for 3 years. I thought about the bottle of Nam Man Muay on the bench. Green glass. Half full. The rag stuffed in the top. Sitting there like a monument to something no one had named. That bottle. I keep thinking about it. Not because it means anything in a narrative sense, it doesn't. A bottle of liniment doesn't change the course of a story. It doesn't decide who wins or loses or teaches or learns. But it was there. It was on that bench. It was present for the afternoon when 2 people who had never met and would probably never meet again stood on a canvas floor and found out what the other one could do. And then one of them taught the other something, not because she'd lost, but because she'd been seen. Sometimes that's enough. Being seen by the right person. Not beaten. Not surpassed. Seen. I think that's what Prasert was trying to tell me, in that parking lot, in that rain, in his imperfect English with the gaps I filled in myself. I think he was trying to say, I saw something that afternoon that I didn't have the words for, in any language, and I carried it for 3 years, and now you have it, and maybe you'll carry it too. I did. 30 years. Here it is. The bottle is probably long gone. Broken, or lost, or thrown away when the camp closed or moved or changed hands. But in the version of this story that lives inside my head, the version with 3 coats of paint and multiple translations and decades of carrying, in that version, the bottle is still on the bench. Still half full. Still smelling like menthol and camphor and something almost sweet. Still a monument to something no one will ever name exactly. That's where I'll leave this.